The Devourers came from the darkness between stars like a nightmare made real. Their ships were not ships at all, but living creatures the size of moons. They moved through space by eating light itself, leaving trails of absolute darkness behind. Admiral Tejo watched the sensor readings with growing horror. How many of them are there? At least 50 major entities, reported Lieutenant Kyung-soo. Each one is larger than Earth. They are surrounded by thousands of smaller creatures. Long until they reach us. 6 hours. Gathering near Earth's moon, but everyone knew their weapons would be useless against enemies this large. The only hope was the Blood Hunters, and they were changing faster than ever. Hannah stood in the command center of Luna Base, surrounded by the pack leaders. They barely looked human anymore. Their eyes glowed with inner fire, their teeth were fangs, and their hands had become claws. Most disturbing of all, they were growing larger, their bodies changing to match their new nature. "The Devourers are here," she said, her voice a deep growl. "This is what we were made for." "Finally," said Jin. Her words barely recognizable as human speech. "The real hunt begins." The other pack leaders nodded in agreement. They could smell the Devourers, even from this distance, and the scent filled them with both hunger and rage. These creatures were the ultimate prey, the enemy that their blood had been waiting to face for thousands of years. "What about the Keth?" asked Baymin. "Do we trust them?" "They are prey animals running from a predator," Hannah replied. "Today, they are our allies. Tomorrow, we will decide if they deserve to live." The plan was simple, but desperate. 24 pack units would combine into one massive hunting party. They would board the Devourer ships and attack from within, using their claws and teeth to tear the creatures apart from the inside. "This is a suicide mission," Admiral Tejo said when he heard the plan. "Those creatures are the size of worlds. How can you possibly hurt them?" "Because we are not human anymore," Hannah replied. "We are apex predators. We were designed to hunt gods." The transformation was accelerating. As the Devourers approached, the Blood Hunters felt their bodies changing even faster. They were becoming something that had never existed before, a perfect fusion of human intelligence and primal hunting instinct. Some of the pack members could no longer speak at all. They communicated through growls, scent, and a form of telepathy that connected all the awakened humans. They were becoming a single creature with many bodies, a pack mind focused on one goal: the hunt. The battle began in the space between Earth and Mars. The Devourers moved slowly, like cosmic whales feeding on the light of stars. As they passed, the space around them became darker, colder, emptier. "All pack units prepare for boarding action," Hannah commanded. But she was no longer really Hannah. She was something else, something that remembered hunting across the galaxy when the universe was young. The Blood Hunters launched themselves from their ships without spacesuits. Their bodies had adapted to the vacuum of space, growing thick skin and internal organs that could survive without air. They moved through the void like swimming predators, heading toward the nearest devourer. The creature was massive, beyond imagination. Its surface was covered in mouths that swallowed light and matter. Its body pulsed with a sick energy that made reality itself seem to bend around it. The Blood Hunters landed on its surface and began to dig. Their claws cut through the creature's hide like knives through paper. They burrowed deep into its body, following instincts that told them where to strike. Inside the devourer, they found a maze of tunnels and chambers. The walls were alive, pulsing with the creature's heartbeat. The air was thick with a substance that would have killed any normal human, but the Blood Hunters breathed it easily. "The heart," Hannah growled to her pack. "We find the heart." They moved through the creature's body like antibodies fighting an infection, but they were not trying to heal the devourer. They were trying to kill it. The creature's immune system responded, sending wave after wave of smaller creatures to stop them. But the Blood Hunters were faster, stronger, and more vicious than anything the devourer had ever faced. Baymin tore through a wall of muscle and found himself in a chamber filled with half-digested planets. The devourer had been feeding on entire worlds, storing them in its body like a spider storing flies. Kyung-soo found the creature's nervous system, a network of glowing tubes that carried information throughout its massive body. She began cutting through the tubes, severing the connections that allowed the creature to think and move. Janae and the others fought their way deeper into the creature's core, following the sound of its heartbeat. The heart was the size of a city, pumping dark energy through the creature's body. "There," Hannah said, pointing at the massive organ. "We kill that. We kill the creature." The final battle was brutal and primal. The blood hunters attacked the heart with everything they had, their claws and teeth tearing through tissues that were harder than diamond. The devourer fought back, flooding the chamber with acid and sending shock waves through its body. But the blood hunters were relentless. They had been created for this moment, bred over thousands of years to be the perfect predators. They tore into the heart like wolves bringing down a giant, working together with perfect coordination. When the heart finally stopped beating, the entire creature shuddered and died. The blood hunters felt a surge of satisfaction that was almost overwhelming. They had done what they were made to do, but the victory came with a price. The transformation was complete now. The blood hunters were no longer human in any meaningful sense. They were something new, something that had never existed before. As they emerged from the dead devourer, they looked up at the stars and felt the ancient hunger stirring in their blood. There were other threats out there, other prey to hunt. The galaxy was full of creatures that might need to be eliminated.
"Oh, what now?"
asked one of the pack members, his voice barely recognizable. Hannah looked at Earth, hanging in the darkness like a blue jewel. She could smell the billions of humans living on its surface, and for a moment she felt the urge to hunt them too. But then she remembered who she had been. She remembered her grandmother's stories, her work in the laboratory, her friends who had believed in her. She remembered what it meant to be human.
"Now we choose," she said. "We can become the monsters that hunt everything, or we can become the guardians that protect what we love." The other blood hunters looked at her with glowing eyes.
They were no longer human, but they still had the power to choose what they would become. "We are the guardians," she said firmly. "We hunt the darkness so that others can live in the light," the pack agreed. They would accept their role as protectors of the galaxy, hunting the threats that no one else could face. But they would never forget that they had once been human, and that humanity was worth protecting. The war was over. The devourers were dead, the Keth were grateful allies, and humanity was safe. But the galaxy was vast, and there were always new threats emerging from the darkness. The blood hunters would be ready. They would hunt in the spaces between stars, keeping watch for the next cosmic threat. They were no longer human, but they were humanity's gift to the galaxy. In the end, they had found their true nature. They were not just beasts or just humans. They were something new, something that could stand between civilization and the void. The whisper in the dark had become a roar that echoed across the galaxy. The blood hunters had awakened. They would never sleep again. But in the quiet moments between hunts, when the stars were peaceful and the darkness was still, they would remember what they had once been. They would remember the woman who had whispered that the beast was her blood, and how no one had believed her until the war roared to life. And they would be grateful that sometimes the monsters are on our side. Lehanna pressed her face against the cold glass of the observation window and watched the three dark shapes move through the tall grass below. The shadow hounds were hunting again. Their massive forms moved like liquid darkness across the green plains of New Hanyang. Each creature stood as tall as a grown man at the shoulder, with thick black fur that seemed to absorb light itself. "Still watching those monsters, Hannah?" Park Gina's voice came from behind her, sharp with disapproval. "You know they killed 2 colonists last month." Hannah turned around to face her former friend. Gina stood in the doorway of the research station. With her arms crossed, her dark hair pulled back in the regulation style that all colonial workers wore. They had been close once, back when they first arrived on New Hanyang 2 years ago. But that was before Hannah started spending all her time studying the shadow hounds. They were defending their territory, Hannah said quietly. The colonists were hunting their cubs. Listen to yourself, Gina shook her head. You talk about them like they're people. They're animals, Hannah. Dangerous animals. Looked back. Out the window, the shadow hounds had stopped moving. The largest one, the one she had named Moon Whisper, was looking directly at the research station. Its yellow eyes seemed to meet hers through the glass. For a moment, neither moved. Then the great beast tilted its head, and what Hannah had learned was a greeting. She raised her hand slowly and pressed it against the window. Moon Whisper's ears twitched forward, and then the creature turned away to follow its pack deeper into the grassland. See, Gina said. Even they know you're watching them. It's creepy, Hannah. Everyone thinks so. Everyone thinks a lot of things, Hannah replied. She gathered her research notes from the observation desk. Most of them are wrong, Gina sighed and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Hannah waited until she was gone, then pulled out her hidden journal. She had been keeping 2 sets of notes for 6 months now. The official ones that went to Dr. Yunte showed basic animal behavior observations. The real ones told a different story. She opened to a fresh page and began writing. Day 187. Made contact with the Alpha again. The pack is using the Northern Valley for their morning hunt. 3 adults, 2 juveniles. They avoid the Eastern Ridge where the mining equipment is working. This suggests they understand human industrial patterns. The research station was quiet around her. Most of the other scientists worked during the day, but Hannah preferred the early morning hours when the shadow hounds were most active. She had learned their schedule over months of careful observation. They hunted at dawn and dusk, rested during the heat of the day, and gathered in groups during the long nights to make their strange musical calls. The first time she had heard those calls, Hannah had thought they were just howls. But as she listened more carefully, she began to hear patterns, rhythms, almost like language. She had started recording them, playing them back, trying to understand what the sounds meant. You're here early again, Lee, Dr. Yunte's voice made her jump. She quickly closed her journal and turned to face the senior researcher. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been studying the wildlife on New Hanyang since the colony was established, but he focused on the smaller, safer creatures. Just finishing my observations, Dr. Yoon Hannah said. About the shadow hounds again, I assume. He shook his head. Hannah, you're a talented researcher, but you're wasting your abilities on those creatures. They're predators. Simple predators. There's nothing more to learn about them. But sir, their behavior patterns suggest they're efficient killers, Dr. Yoon interrupted. Which is exactly what we expect from an apex predator. I've read your reports. You're anthropomorphizing them, giving them human qualities they don't possess. It's a common mistake among young researchers. Hannah felt her cheeks burn. I'm not anthropomorphizing them. I'm observing genuine intelligence. Intelligence? Dr. Yoon laughed. Hannah, they're animals. Dangerous animals. The colonial administration is already discussing a culling program to reduce their numbers. Your reports about their supposed intelligence aren't helping matters. A culling program? Hannah's heart sank. But they're not attacking anyone unless provoked. They're a threat to colonial expansion, Dr. Yoon said. Kim Woo has made that very clear. We need to expand our agricultural zones, and the shadow hounds are in the way. After Dr. Yoon left, Hannah sat alone in the observation room. Window, she could see the colonial settlements spread out below. Rows of prefabricated buildings housed the 2,000 humans who now called New Hanyang home. Agricultural fields stretched to the east, while mining operations scarred the western hills. The colony was growing rapidly, pushing further into the wilderness each month, and the shadow hounds were being pushed back. Her communicator beeped. A message from Kim Woo, the colonial administrator. Report to my office at 0800 hours. Important discussion regarding your research assignment. Hannah's stomach twisted. She had been dreading this conversation for weeks. The other researchers whispered that Kim Woo was planning to transfer her off-world. Her obsession with the shadow hounds was becoming an embarrassment to the research station. She looked out the window one more time, hoping to see the pack in the distance. But the grasslands were empty. The shadowhounds had disappeared into the deep forest where humans rarely went. What Kim Woo and the others didn't know was that Hannah had been going there. For 3 months, she had been making secret trips into shadowhound territory. She had learned to move quietly to avoid their patrol routes, to observe them from hiding spots they couldn't detect. And 2 weeks ago, something incredible had happened. She had made contact. It started when she found an injured juvenile caught in an old mining trap. The young shadowhound was bleeding and weak, unable to free itself from the metal snare. Hannah had approached slowly, speaking in soft tones, using the same musical patterns she had heard in their calls. The juvenile had stopped struggling and looked at her with those intelligent yellow eyes. She had worked carefully to free it from the trap, cleaning its wounds with supplies from her first aid kit. When she was finished, the young shadowhound had touched her hand gently with its massive paw before disappearing into the forest. The next day, she found gifts. Small items left at the edge of the research station grounds. Interesting stones, rare flowers, the shed scales of other creatures. It was clear that the shadowhounds were leaving them for her, and then Moon Whisper had appeared. The alpha had approached her during one of her secret visits to the forest. Instead of attacking, it had sat down a few meters away and begun making those musical calls. Hannah had tried to respond, copying the sounds as best she could. Moon Whisper had tilted its head, considering her efforts, then had begun what could only be described as a lesson. They had been meeting 3 times a week since then. Hannah was learning their language, and they were learning hers. Simple concepts at first: danger, safe, food, pack. But gradually, more complex ideas began to emerge. The shadowhounds had a rich culture. They had names for each other, stories they shared, traditions passed down through generations. They were not just intelligent animals. They were a people. But how could she explain this to Kim Woo? How could she make the colonists understand that they were not alone on New Henyang, that they shared this world with another sentient species? Hannah gathered her things and prepared to leave the observation room. In a few hours, she would face Kim Woo and probably lose her position. But she would not give up on the shadowhounds. They had become more than research subjects to her. They had become family as she walked down the empty hallway. Hannah didn't notice the emergency alert beginning to flash on the long-range communication console. She didn't see the automated message that had just arrived from the outer system monitoring stations. Unknown fleet detected, multiple vessels. Estimated time to New Hanyang, 48 hours. The message would not be discovered until the morning shift arrived. By then, everything would change. But for now, in the quiet hours before dawn, Hannah walked through the research station, thinking about yellow eyes and musical calls, about a pack of creatures that the colonists feared, but she had learned to love. She had no idea that soon those creatures would be the key to everyone's survival. Kim Woo's office felt smaller than usual when Hannah walked in at exactly 8 o'clock. The colonial administrator sat behind his metal desk, his face hard and serious. Next to him stood a man Hannah had never seen before, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Colonial Defense Force. "Sit down, Lee," Hannah Kim Woo said without looking up from his tablet. "This is Commander Ru Jin. He arrived on the supply ship this morning." Commander Ru Jin was a tall man with sharp eyes and graying hair. He studied Hannah carefully as she took her seat. "Miss Lee, I've been reading your research reports. Very interesting work." Hannah felt surprised. She had expected criticism, not praise. "Thank you, sir." However, Kim Woo interrupted, "We need to discuss your future here on New Hanyang. Your focus on the shadowhounds has become problematic. The other researchers complain that you're not contributing to useful projects." "Sir, I believe my work is useful," Hannah said carefully. "The shadowhounds are an important part of this planet's ecosystem." "They're a threat to our expansion," Kim Woo replied. "Dr. Yoon has recommended we transfer you to the Botanical Research Station on Kepler 44b. Your skills would be better used there." Hannah's heart sank. Kepler 44b was 3 months away by ship. If they sent her there, she would never see the shadowhounds again. "Sir, please. I just need more time to complete My research. Commander Rujin held up his hand. Before we make any decisions about personnel transfers, there's something more urgent we need to discuss.
Activated.
A holographic display above the desk. At 0300 hours this morning, our long-range sensors detected this. The hologram showed a star map of the local system. Red dots appeared at the edge of the display, moving steadily toward New Henyang's position. There were dozens of them, and they were large. Unknown Fleet Commander Ru Jin said grimly. 47 vessels, ranging from frigate to capital ship size. They'll reach our system in approximately 46 hours. Kim Woo leaned forward. Could they be traitors? Another human colony expedition? Negative, the commander replied. The ship designs don't match any known human or allied alien configurations, and they're coming from the direction of the Outer Rim, where we lost contact with 3 colonies last year. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. Everyone in the outer colonies had heard whispers about the lost settlements. Ships had been sent to investigate, but they had found nothing. No people, no buildings, no signs of life. Just empty worlds stripped of all organic matter. You think it's the same force that destroyed the other colonies? Kim Woo asked. I think we need to prepare. For the worst, Commander Yu Jin said, I'm declaring a colonial emergency. All civilian personnel will begin evacuation procedures immediately. Evacuation? Hannah spoke up. But there are 2,000 people here. Do we have enough ships? Commander Yu Jin's expression grew darker. The supply ship that brought me here can carry 300 people. We have 2 smaller transports that can handle another 200 each. That's 700 people total. The math was simple and terrible. 700 people could escape. 1,300 would have to stay behind. There has to be another way, Kim Woo said. What about the cargo ships? They're not equipped for passengers, the commander replied. No life support systems, no safety equipment. We'd lose more people trying to evacuate in those ships than we'd save. Hannah thought about the Shadowhounds. They knew this planet better than any human. They had lived here for generations, surviving whatever dangers this world held. What if we didn't evacuate? What if we found a way to hide? Both men looked at her with surprise. Hide 2,000 people? Kim Woo asked. Where? The Shadowhounds know cave systems throughout the northern mountains, Hannah said. Deep caves that our surveys haven't mapped yet. If we could, you want to trust our lives to wild animals? Kim Woo's voice rose. Hannah, this is exactly the kind of thinking that makes you unsuitable for this position. We're talking about a real crisis, not your pet project. Sir, they're not just animals, Hannah said desperately. They're intelligent. They have language, culture, social structures. They could help us if we asked them properly. Commander Rujin studied her with new interest. You're serious about this, aren't you? You really believe these creatures are intelligent? I know they are, Hannah said. I've been communicating with them for months. They understand human speech. They can learn. They solve problems. They're people, just different from us. Even if that were true, Kim Woo said, why would they help us? We've been expanding into their territory, hunting them, treating them as pests. They have no reason to trust humans. Hannah thought about Moon Whisper, about the gifts left at the research station, about the way the Alpha had patiently taught her their language. Because that's what people do for each other. They help when help is needed. The office fell silent. Outside the window, Hannah could see colonists going about their normal morning routines. They didn't know yet that their world was about to change forever. Commander Rujin broke the silence. Even if we could hide everyone in caves, we'd still need to defend ourselves. The enemy fleet will scan the planet. They'll find us eventually. What kind of weapons do we have? Hannah asked. The Colonial Defense Force has 50 soldiers with standard equipment, the commander replied. It's 6 armored vehicles, 2 aircraft, and a handful of stationary defense systems. Against a fleet of 47 ships, we'd last maybe an hour. Wu stood up and walked to the window. So our choices are to evacuate some people and leave the rest to die, or to hide everyone and hope they don't find us. There might be a third option, Commander Rujin said slowly. We could fight. Fight. Kim Woo turned around. Just said we'd last an hour. A conventional fight. Yes. But if Miss Lee is right about the Shadowhounds, if they really are intelligent and could be convinced to help us, then we might have a chance. They know the terrain. They're natural hunters. Combined with our technology and their knowledge of the planet, you're talking about an alliance, Hannah said, her heart beginning to race. Humans and Shadowhounds fighting together. It's insane, Kim Woo said. We can't base our survival on fairy tales about talking animals, Sir Hannah said, standing up. Give me 24 hours. Let me prove to you that they're intelligent. Let me show you what they're capable of. And if you can't, Commander Rujin asked. Then we proceed with the evacuation plan, Hannah said. But if I can prove it, if I can show you that the Shadowhounds are our equals, will you consider an alliance? Kim Woo looked at Commander Rujin, who nodded slowly. The fleet won't arrive for another 46 hours. We have time for one attempt. Fine, Kim Woo said. You have until tomorrow morning. But Hannah, if this doesn't work, if you can't prove what you're claiming, you'll be on the first evacuation ship out of here. Hannah nodded. I understand. As she left the office, her mind was already racing. She had to find Moon Whisper. She had to explain what was coming. She had to convince the Shadowhounds to trust the humans who had been their enemies. She looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, a fleet of unknown ships was approaching. In less than 2 days, they would arrive at New Hanyang. And when they did, everything would change. The colonists still didn't know. They were still going about their daily lives, working in the fields, running their businesses, raising their children. They had no idea that their world was about to be invaded by forces they couldn't fight with conventional weapons. But Hannah had an idea, a desperate, impossible idea that might just work. She thought about the injured juvenile she had helped, about the gifts the Shadowhounds had left for her, about the patient way Moon Whisper had taught her their language. The creatures she had studied for so long might be the key to everyone's survival. Now, she had to convince them to fight alongside the humans who had never understood them. She had 24 hours to build a bridge between two species. The fate of New Hanyang depended on it. Hannah ran through the forest faster than she had ever run before. Branches tore at her clothing and scratched her face, but she didn't slow down. She had to reach the meeting place before sunset. She had to find Moon Whisper. The trees grew thicker. As she moved deeper into Shadowhound territory, the canopy above blocked most of the sunlight, leaving the forest floor in a green twilight. Hannah had walked this path dozens of times, but never with such urgency. She reached the small clearing where she always met the Alpha. It was empty. She sat on the fallen log that served as her usual spot and began making the musical calls that meant safe meeting in Shadowhound language. The response came immediately, a low, melodious howl from somewhere in the trees. Then another and another. The pack was close. Moon Whisper emerged from the shadows first, moving with the silent grace that gave his species their name. The great creature was even larger than Hannah remembered, his black fur rippling with muscle. His yellow eyes studied her carefully, and she could see intelligence there, ancient wisdom. 3 other Shadowhounds followed him into the clearing. Hannah recognized them from her previous visits. There was Stormclaw, the pack's second in command, a female with silver streaks in her dark fur. Swiftwind, a younger male, with bright eyes and quick movements, and Nightsong, an older female who often stayed close to Moon Whisper. Moon Whisper, Hannah said, using the combination of sounds and gestures that represented his name in their language. I need to speak with you. Danger comes. The Alpha tilted his head, his ears pricked forward. He made a series of low sounds that Hannah had learned meant what danger. Sky hunters, Hannah said, using the Shadowhound word for aerial predators. Many sky hunters, coming from the star paths. They will hunt all life on this world. Moon Whispers. Eyes narrowed. He made a questioning sound, and Hannah realized he didn't understand what she meant by star paths. She pointed up at the sky, then moved her hands in a sweeping motion, from beyond the sky, from other worlds. Flying machines that carry destroyers. The pack exchanged glances. Stormclaw stepped forward and made a series of rapid calls. Responded with what sounded like a question. They want to know if these sky hunters are the same ones that destroyed the dead worlds, Hannah said, translating as best she could. Then she stopped. Wait, you know about the dead worlds? Moon Whisper made a sound that Hannah had learned meant yes. Then he began a longer series of calls, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality that meant he was sharing pack history as she listened. Hannah realized what he was telling her. The Shadowhounds were not originally from New Hanyang. They had come from another world, fleeing from destroyers that consumed everything in their path. They had escaped in great ships, searching for a new home. Most of the refugee ships had been destroyed, but a few had found safe worlds. You're refugees, Hannah whispered. You've been running from them for generations. Moon Whisper made the sound for yes again. Then he began another story, this one about the dead worlds he had mentioned. Other planets where the Shadowhounds had tried to make new homes only to be found by the destroyers. Worlds that were now empty, stripped of all life, are called the Void Collective, Hannah said, using the human term. We've lost 3 colonies to them. Now they're coming here. The pack grew agitated. Stormclaw snarled, showing her massive teeth. Swiftwind paced back and forth, his tail lashing. Nightsong made a low, mournful sound. My people want to run. Hannah continued. But we don't have enough ships to carry everyone. Most will have to stay and hide. Moon Whisper looked at her for a long moment. Then he made the sound that meant we're hide. That's what I need to ask you, Hannah said. You know this world better than we do. Are there places where many people could hide? Deep caves, hidden valleys? The Alpha considered this. He began making a series of calls, and the other Shadowhounds joined in. It sounded like a discussion, with different voices offering different opinions. Finally, Moon Whisper turned back to Hannah. He made the sound for yes, then began describing locations. The northern mountains had deep cave systems. The eastern canyons had hidden valleys. The western forests had groves so thick that flying machines couldn't see through them. Could you show my people these places? Hannah asked. Could you help them hide? The pack fell silent. Stormclaw made a sharp sound that Hannah recognized as the word for enemies. She gestured toward the direction of the human colony. I know, Hannah said. My people have been enemies to yours. We've taken your hunting grounds. Some of us have even hunted you. But the Void Collective is everyone's enemy if we don't work. Together, we'll all die. Moon Whisper made a questioning sound. Hannah thought for a moment, then tried to explain the concept of alliance using the words she knew. Pack bond, she said. Human pack and Shadowhound pack fighting together, stronger together than apart. The Alpha's ears twitched. He made the sound that meant perhaps, then began what sounded like a series of conditions. As Hannah listened, she realized he was asking about her people's intentions. Would they respect Shadowhound territory after the danger passed? Would they stop hunting the pack? Would they share the world instead of taking it? Yes, Hannah said. I promise. Would you help us? We'll make a treaty. A permanent peace between our peoples. Moon Whisper looked at the other members of his pack. They began another discussion, this one longer and more intense. Hannah could pick out individual words and phrases, but the conversation was too complex for her to follow completely. While they talked, the sun began to set. The forest grew darker, and Hannah started to worry about getting back to the colony before the emergency meeting. Kim Woo and Commander Ru Jin were expecting her report. Finally, Moon Whisper turned back to her. He made the sound for agreement, then began outlining what his pack would do. They would guide the humans to the hidden caves and valleys. They would share their knowledge of the Void Collective's weaknesses. They would fight alongside the humans if the destroyers found them. But they had one condition. The humans had to prove they were worthy of trust. They had to show that they could treat the Shadowhounds as equals, not as animals. How? Hannah asked. How do we prove this? Moon Whisper made a sound she didn't recognize. He repeated it several times, then began acting out something with his body language. He crouched low, then stood tall. He moved in a circle, then stopped, and looked directly at her. You want to meet with our leaders? Hannah said, understanding finally. You want to speak with them directly. The Alpha made the sound for yes. Hannah's heart raced. She imagined Kim Woo's reaction when she told him that the Shadowhounds wanted to attend the emergency meeting. He would think she had lost her mind. But she also remembered Commander Rujin's words. They needed every advantage they could get. If the Shadowhounds really did know how to fight the Void Collective, then the humans had to listen. "Tomorrow morning," Hannah said, "at the colony." "Will you come?" Moon Whisper made the sound for yes, and added something that made the other Shadowhounds rumble with what sounded like laughter. "What did you say?" Hannah asked. The Alpha made the sound again, and this time Hannah understood. He had said time for Human Pack to learn new tricks. As she ran back through the forest toward the colony, Hannah felt a mixture of hope and terror. She had done it. She had convinced the Shadowhounds to help. But now she had to convince her own people to accept that help. The emergency meeting was already in progress when she arrived at the colony administration building. Through the windows, she could see dozens of people crowded into the main conference room. Kim Woo stood at the front, pointing at a holographic display that showed the approaching fleet. Hannah took a deep breath and walked inside. Every eye turned to her as she entered the room. "Well," Kim Woo asked, "did you find your talking animals?" "Yes," Hannah said. "And they want to meet with you? Tomorrow morning?" "They have information about the enemy fleet, and they're willing to help us fight." The room erupted in surprised voices. Some people laughed. Others looked shocked. A few looked angry. "You're telling us that wild animals want to attend a strategy meeting?" Dr. Yuntei asked. "I'm telling you that our new allies want to discuss battle plans," Hannah replied. "The Shadowhounds have been fighting the Void Collective for generations. They know how to survive." Commander Rujin stepped forward. "Miss Lee, are you certain about this? You're asking us to trust the fate of this colony to creatures we've always considered dangerous predators?" "I'm asking you to trust the fate of this colony to people who have been fighting our enemies longer than we have," Hannah said. "People who are willing to risk their lives to help us, even though we've never shown them the same courtesy."
The room
fell silent. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those stars, the Void Collective fleet was getting closer. In 18 hours, they would arrive at New Hanyang, and when they did, humanity would find out whether the alliance between two species could survive the storm that was coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the colony's main square when Moon Whisper arrived. He came alone, walking slowly through the streets, while colonists stared from windows and doorways. Children pointed in wonder and fear. Adults reached for weapons they didn't carry. Hannah met him at the administration building. The great Shadowhound stood taller than her, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd of humans that had gathered to watch. He made a low sound that meant many frightened ones. "They've never seen you up close," Hannah said. "They don't understand yet." Inside the conference room, Kim Woo and Commander Rujin waited with 20 other colonial leaders. The air was thick with tension. Dr. Yuntei sat in the corner, shaking his head in disbelief. Park Gina stood near the door, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Gentlemen, ladies," Hannah said as she entered with Moon Whisper beside her. "I present the Alpha of the Northern Pack, Moon Whisper." The Shadowhound looked around the room, studying each face. Then he made a series of melodious sounds that filled the air with strange music. "He says greetings to the Human Pack leaders," Hannah translated. "He hopes for wisdom in our discussions." Kim Woo stared at the massive creature. "It really is intelligent, isn't it?" Moon Whisper tilted his head and made another sound. This time, he spoke in broken but clear human words. "Yes, we are intelligent. We have always been intelligent." The room fell silent. Even Dr. Yuntei stopped shaking his head. "You can speak our language?" Commander Rujin asked. "Some words," Moon Whisper replied, his voice deep and careful. "Hannah friend teaches. We learn. We listen to Human Pack for many seasons." "Seasons?" Kim Woo asked. "Years," Hannah translated. "They've been listening to our radio communications, learning our language. They understand more than they can speak." Commander Zhu Jin stepped forward. "Moon Whisper, Hannah tells us you know about the fleet that's coming. Can you help us fight them?" The Alpha's ears flattened against his head. He made a long, mournful sound, then switched back to human words. Void Eaters. Machine death. They killed our birth world. They killed many worlds where my people tried to live. How do we fight them? The commander asked. Moonwhisper began speaking in his own language, with Hannah translating. The Void Collective machines were vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound and electromagnetic energy. They could be disrupted, but only at close range. The key was to get close enough to use these weapons without being destroyed first. The Shadowhounds have been developing tactics against them for generations, Hannah explained. Hit-and-run attacks, stealth approaches. They know how to fight an enemy that's technologically superior. What do you need from us? Kim Woo asked. Moonwhisper spoke directly to him. Trust, respect. No more hunting, my people. Work together as equals. Kim Woo looked around the room at the other leaders. Slowly he nodded. If we survive this, you have my word. No more hunting. No more expansion into your territory without permission. The Alpha made a sound that meant satisfaction. Then he began outlining his plan. The humans would evacuate the most vulnerable people to the mountain caves. The Shadowhounds would guide them there and help them hide. The remaining fighters, both human and Shadowhound, would prepare for guerrilla warfare. How many of your people will fight? Commander Rugen asked. All who can hold weapons, Moonwhisper replied. 200 pack warriors. Maybe more from other packs. The room buzzed with excitement. 200 additional fighters could make a real difference. As the meeting continued, Hannah noticed something remarkable happening. The human leaders were beginning to treat Moonwhisper as an equal. They asked for his opinions, listened to his suggestions, and included him in their planning. The fear was being replaced by respect. Dr. Yunte approached Hannah during a break. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I was wrong about the Shadowhounds, about everything. We were all wrong, Hannah replied. We just needed to learn how to listen. The emergency broadcast came at noon. The Void Collective fleet had entered the system 12 hours early. They would arrive at New Hanyang in 6 hours, not 18. The evacuation needs to start now, Commander Rujin announced. All non-essential personnel to the mountain caves immediately. Chaos erupted in the colony. Families packed essential supplies. Children cried as they were separated from their parents. The elderly and sick were loaded onto vehicles for the journey to the caves. Hannah found herself in charge of coordinating between the human evacuees and the Shadowhound guides. It was overwhelming at first, but gradually a system emerged. Shadowhounds would lead groups of 50 humans each, taking different routes to avoid overcrowding the paths. Park Gina approached her as she organized another group. Hannah, I want to apologize. I was wrong about you, about everything you were trying to do. You don't have time for apologies, Hannah said, but she smiled. I need your help. Can you work with the Shadowhounds to coordinate the evacuation? Gina nodded. Tell me what to do, asked. The afternoon wore on, the colony emptied. 1,200 people made the journey to the caves, guided by Shadowhound escorts. The remaining 800 were fighters, support staff, and volunteers who refused to leave. The first Void Collective ships appeared in the sky just as the sun began to set. They were massive, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light. Their presence made the air itself feel heavy and wrong. Hannah stood on the roof of the administration building with Moonwhisper, watching the ships descend. The Alpha's fur was standing on end, and he made a low, growling sound. How many ships? He asked. 47, Hannah replied. Just like the intelligence report said. Too many, Moonwhisper said, but we have advantages. We know this world. They do not. The first landing craft touched down in the agricultural fields outside the colony. They were smaller than the mother ships, but still enormous by human standards. Ramps descended, and the first Void Collective units began to emerge. Hannah had never seen them before, but she had heard descriptions from the few survivors of other colonies. They were not truly alive, but they were not simple machines either. They moved with purpose, their metallic bodies shifting and adapting as they encountered new terrain. They're scouting, Commander Ru Jin said through the radio. Maintain positions. Do not engage until they get closer. The machine scouts spread out across the field, their sensors sweeping the area. Some moved toward the colony, while others headed for the forests where the Shadowhounds waited. "Now we see if your plan works," Hannah said to Moonwhisper. The Alpha made a sound that might have been laughter. "Now we see if Human Pack and Shadowhound Pack can fight as one." The battle for New Hanyang was about to begin. In the forests, 200 Shadowhound warriors waited in silence. In the colony, 800 humans prepared their weapons and equipment, and in the mountain caves, 1,200 people waited and hoped that their two species could overcome their differences, long enough to save them all. The Void Collective. Scouts reached the edge of the colony just as the last light faded from the sky. In the darkness, the real test of the Alliance would begin. Hannah looked at Moonwhisper, then at the approaching enemy. "Ready?" The Alpha showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Ready, Pack Sister." The first shots of the battle rang. Out across the plains of New Hanyang, the war for two worlds had begun. 6 months after the silence fell, New Hanyang looked different. The destroyed buildings had been rebuilt, but this time they were designed to accommodate both humans and Shadowhounds. Wide doorways allowed the large creatures to move freely. Through public spaces, meeting halls had been built with both human seating and Shadowhound resting areas. Hannah stood in the central plaza, watching children play together. Human kids ran alongside young Shadowhounds, their laughter mixing with the musical calls of their alien friends. The sight that had once terrified the colonists now brought smiles to their faces. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months, Park Gina said, joining her friend at the memorial statue. The sculpture showed Moonwhisper, with his head raised, frozen. In the moment, he began the Song of Ending. Round the base, words were carved in both human and Shadowhound languages. He gave his voice so others could find theirs. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Hannah replied. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Kim Woo approached them, walking slowly with the help of a cane. He had been injured in the final battle, but he refused to leave New Hanyang. "The morning reports. Miss Lee," he said, offering her a tablet. "Oh, I suppose I should call you?" "Director Lee now." Hannah smiled. Her new title still felt strange. After the war, the colonial government had created a new position, Director of Interspecies Relations. She was responsible for maintaining the alliance between humans and Shadowhounds, ensuring that the peace treaty was honored by both sides. "How? Are the new arrivals settling in?" she asked, scrolling through the reports. "Very well," Kim Woo replied. "The Shadowhound refugees from the Kepler system should be fully integrated within a month. They're impressed by how well our two species work together here." Word of the alliance had spread throughout the galaxy. Other human colonies facing Void Collective attacks had reached out for help. Meanwhile, scattered Shadowhound packs had begun arriving at New Hanyang, hoping to find the peace their species had been seeking for generations. "The council meeting is in an hour," Kim Woo reminded her. "Are you ready?" Hannah nodded. The Interspecies Council was another innovation born from the war. It consisted of both human and Shadowhound representatives who made decisions about the colony's future together. Today they would be discussing the proposed expansion of the agricultural zones, a project that required careful coordination to avoid disturbing Shadowhound hunting grounds. As she walked toward the council building, Hannah passed the new research station. Through the windows, she could see Dr. Yuntae working alongside Nightsong, the elderly Shadowhound who had become his research partner. They were studying the planet's ecosystem, learning how to balance human development with environmental protection. The council chamber was already busy when she arrived. Human representatives sat at curved tables, while Shadowhounds rested on specially designed platforms. At the center of the room, a young Shadowhound named Brightclaw served as the translator. She had learned human language faster than any other member of her species, and she now helped facilitate communication during official meetings. "The proposed agricultural expansion covers 200 hectares, Councillor Osu was saying. "However, the Shadowhound representatives have expressed concerns about disrupting the spring migration routes." Stormclaw, who had become the new Alpha after Moonwhisper's death, made a series of musical sounds, Brightclaw translated. "Alpha Stormclaw suggests moving the expansion to the southern valley instead." The soil quality is just as good, and it would not interfere with pack movements. It's actually a better location, admitted engineer Kong Min. The Southern Valley has better access to water resources. Anna smiled as she watched the discussion unfold. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. Now it was routine. The two species had learned to work together, to respect each other's needs and perspectives. After the meeting, she walked to the memorial garden where Moonwhisper was buried. The site had become a place of pilgrimage for both species. Humans came to pay their respects to the alpha who had saved their colony. Shadowhounds came to honor the leader who had sacrificed himself for peace. Stormclaw was already there, lying beside the grave with her head resting on her paws. The new alpha had been Moonwhisper's closest friend, and she still visited him every day. "How are you feeling?" Hannah asked, using the Shadowhound language she had continued to study. "Sad but proud," Stormclaw replied. Moonwhisper would be happy to see what his sacrifice created. "What do you think he would say about the refugee packs arriving?" Stormclaw's tail wagged slightly. He would say, "The family grows larger." That evening, Hannah attended the weekly community gathering in the central plaza. It had become a tradition to share stories and songs from both cultures. Tonight, a group of human children performed a play about the war, while a pack of young shadowhounds demonstrated their hunting techniques. Li Bin, now fully recovered from his injuries, stood up to address the crowd. 6 months ago, we were strangers sharing a world. Today, we are family sharing a home. The Void Collective tried to destroy us, but instead they gave us something precious, the chance to discover that we are stronger together than we ever were apart. The crowd cheered, human voices mixing with shadowhound calls. Dr. Namri, the xenopsychologist who had helped establish the communication protocols, wiped tears from her eyes. Commander Ru Jin, who had stayed on as the colony's military advisor, nodded approvingly as the evening wound down. Hannah found herself talking with a group of children who had been born after the war. They didn't remember a time when humans and shadowhounds were enemies. To them, the alliance was natural, normal. Miss Hannah, a little girl named Li Su, asked, "Why did the old humans think the shadowhounds were scary?" Hannah knelt down to the child's level because they didn't understand them. When people are afraid of things they don't understand, they sometimes make bad choices. But they're not scary, the girl insisted. "Swiftwind taught me how to track rabbit prints yesterday." "No, they're not scary," Hannah agreed. "They're family." Later that night, as the plaza emptied, Hannah stood alone under the stars. Memorial. Statue cast a long shadow in the moonlight, and she could almost hear Moonwhisper's voice on the wind. "We did it," she whispered to the statue. "We kept our promise. Humans and shadowhounds living together as equals. Your sacrifice wasn't in vain." A gentle touch on her shoulder made her turn around. Stormclaw stood beside her, the new alpha's presence, comforting and strong. "He knows," Stormclaw said in her careful human words. "His song continues in every child who plays with both species. His pack bond lives in every human who calls a shadowhound friend." Hannah smiled and placed her hand on Stormclaw's massive shoulder. "Thank you for everything, for fighting alongside us, for staying, for helping us build this new world." "Thank you for seeing us as people," Stormclaw replied. "For believing in us when no one else would." As they stood together in the moonlight, Hannah thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a lonely girl who watched creatures in the grass and wondered what they were thinking. It had led to a war that tested the courage of two species, and it had ended with a new definition of family. The girl who had been mocked for calling beasts, her family had helped create a world where that was no longer unusual, where children of both species played together, learned together, and grew up together, where the bonds between different peoples were stronger than the forces that tried to divide them. The silence that had fallen on the battlefield had become the foundation for a new kind of music, a song of cooperation, understanding, and hope that would echo through the stars for generations to come. New Hanyang was no longer just a human colony or a shadowhound refuge. It was home to a new kind of family, one that proved that love and loyalty could bridge any gap, overcome any difference. and create something beautiful from the ashes of war. The song of ending had become the song of beginning, and the melody would play on forever.